Hello, everyone. Welcome to the historic Hayslip Hall House here at Brentsville Courthouse Historic Center. My name is Paige Gibbons-Backus, and I am a site manager with the Prince William County Historic Preservation Division. And today, we are going to show you how you can actually make beaten biscuits at home using a historic recipe. And so it's up to you if you want to make this a little bit more challenging and try cooking it outside, maybe in your backyard, over a fire like we have here in our open hearth, or something like this is something that you can make in your oven as well, so you can get a historic taste using modern conveniences. And so to give you a little bit of an idea where we are here in the historic Hayslip Hall farmhouse that was built in about the 1850s here in Prince William County on the western end towards Linton Hall Road. We were actually able to preserve this historic farmhouse. We were able to pick it up and move it here to Brentsville Courthouse so that we would be able to interpret how a lot of people were living here in Prince William County in the 1850s with the modern conveniences of the time, such as candles and lanterns and the open hearth fire for cooking, but without the modern conveniences that we are used to today. And so what we are going to be showing you all how to make today are beaten biscuits. And this is an early 1800s recipe, and it's rather simple, so it's something that you can very easily do at home with just a few items that you might already have in your pantry or in your refrigerator, as well as some modern conveniences like the oven that you have at home, or if you want to make it a little bit more challenging, you can actually build a fire outside, try cooking it over the fire as well. For the historic recipe that we have here, I'm going to read you the recipe that as it was when it was written and published in books, in publications, where families could get different ideas for recipes similar to the way that we do today. And the recipe that we have here for beaten biscuits says to take 1 quart of flour, lard the size of a hen's egg, about 1 teaspoonful of salt, and you make it into a moderately stiff dough with sweet milk. Beat for half an hour. Make it with a hand or cut with a biscuit cutter. Stick it with a fork and bake in the hot oven, not sufficiently hot to blister the biscuit. And that's all the recipe says. So how do you take a historic recipe like that doesn't have a lot of information with it and turn it into an activity, turn it into a modern recipe that we can actually use today, that we can make at home in our kitchens or here in the Hayslip Hall House? And so I have some ingredients here that we're going to be using today. We have milk, we have flour, and for today's purposes, we have vegetable shortening. But historically, if you were to make this recipe, like it says, you would use lard, which is actually the fat from a pig. And so families who were living here in Prince William County here, like homes here in the Hayslip Hall House, where did they get these materials? Well, a lot of these materials, they would be getting here from the farms, because for a lot of them, they are as self-sustaining as you could possibly be. So where would you get these items? The recipe calls for lard, it calls for flour, it calls for sweet milk, it calls for salt. So a lot of these farms, like the Hayslip Hall House here, they might have some of these items here on the farm already for them to use, but a lot of these families here within Prince William County are at this point in time in the 1850s going out and purchasing some items here that they could use there on the farm. They're also making things here if they have extra butter or if they get extra milk, things of that nature, they'll be selling it as well. And so while some of the materials would have come here or would have been found here at the Hayslip Hall farmhouse, some of these items would have been purchased, such as our flour here. Now, flour is very difficult to make at home for small consumption. So where would a farm like this get all the materials available that they would have to make biscuits? You have flour, you have lard, you have salt, you have sweet milk. Well, a lot of the farms here in the area are not self-sustainable at this point in the 1850s. They would actually be getting some of their supplies from others who are here in the area and other industries, such as our flour, for example, would not have been made here at the Hayslip Hall House. It was actually purchased from a mill nearby, Milford, which is actually located now where the Chick-fil-A and where the Target is on Route 28. And so Sweet milk. Sweet milk is actually milk that has not been pasteurized yet. So it comes straight from the cow, and so it has a lot of that extra thickness in it, a lot of that extra flavor, and a lot of that extra taste in it. And so they would actually probably be getting some of that here at the farm for the little bit that they would need to make biscuits. And the lard, which is actually pig fat, may have been found here on farms like this if the families had some pigs available, or it could be purchased from local stores or local markets nearby. And so for our case here, we're not actually going to be using lard today. We are actually going to be using vegetable shortening, but you could use either one at home. And so we've adapted the recipe for you all to be able to make the recipe at home, so you can either follow along with this video, or you can click on the link below and you can actually be able to access the recipe that's posted online. And so to start, first thing that we have to do is we're taking our heaping scoop of flours and we have to mix it all together into our bowl. All right, so you're gonna take your heaping scoops of flour, and we're just going to take and just dump the whole thing right in there. Dump it into your mixing bowl. And then we're going to take our lard, which is the size of a hen's egg. So we're just going to take a big scoop there. That looks about the size of a hen's egg, don't you think? We're going to dump it into our flour. We're going to take just a little pinch of salt, mix it in there as well. And then what you have to do is you have to cut the flour and cut the shortening in order to mix it in. If you try to mix in your lard or your shortening the way it is, all you're going to do is you're going to get a bowl of flour with a flour-covered bunch of shortening in it. So what you actually have to do is you actually have to take a couple of pairs of knives and you actually have to start cutting the flour and cutting the shortening as you see here. And as you start cutting it in, you'll notice that you start getting smaller chunks of shortening into your flour and into your salt mix. I'm going to take a little bit more shortening here, mix it in, cut it in. So you can see after a few minutes of cutting our shortening into our flour, you get some shortening in there that looks almost like little peas in your flour mix, and that's exactly what you want. And now at this point, we're ready to take our sweet milk, in which I have heavy cream here, and we are going to start pouring it into our flour mix in order to start making a dough. You really only have to add a little bit at a time, and so that way, you can start getting a little bit of a doughy consistency, but you only want to do a little bit at a time, because once you add too much milk in there and it gets too sticky, it's hard to go back, and a lot of the times you have to start over again. And so you want your dough to start sticking to where it starts to make one big ball. Once you start getting that big ball, then we're going to get to the fun part, which is actually beating the biscuits. All right, so you can see here that we've been able to add enough milk to be able to get a nice round, thick, solid piece of dough that we can actually use to start beating the biscuits. Now, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take some flour so that I can coat it so that it doesn't stick to my cloth. But really all you need is you need a cloth at home, you need a cutting board if you would like to not bang on your table or on your counter. And so that way you don't damage anything at home, and that way you don't start sending flour everywhere. And so why do we have to beat the biscuit? When baking things at home, like cakes, cookies, things of that nature, there's typically an ingredient that gets mixed in with all of the salt with the flour. And that ingredient is baking soda or baking powder. And that helps to make doughs and cookies and things like that rise, and it gives them that light and fluffy texture to it. Well, baking soda for cooking purposes really wasn't around until about the 1840s. And so while it might have been here for families such as the Haslip Hall families to use here in this historic kitchen, it might not have been available for everyone to use. And so instead of having baking soda to put air into our biscuits, we actually have to do it the old-fashioned or the historic way, which is actually to beat the biscuits. And so what you have to do is you make sure your dough is rolled into a nice ball. Make sure you cover it with your cloth so that you don't get flour everywhere. And then you literally take your rolling pin and start whacking. and you whack the dough in to start beating the biscuits. Now you'll start getting a flat shape to your dough. What you have to do then is you start taking your dough and you start folding it over. And you keep beating it. And so if your dough starts to get a little bit sticky, all you have to do is just add more flour to it. Add more flour to both sides so that it no longer sticks together. You keep folding it and you keep beating it. And historically, the recipe calls for the biscuits to be beaten for about a half an hour. So I'm going to get back to beating my biscuits and I'll check in with you in a little bit. All right, it's been a half an hour. My arms are thoroughly tired and our dough has now been beaten where we're ready to roll it out and start making the biscuits. Well, the first thing that you have to do is you have to start preparing your pan. And so with a little extra piece of lard or vegetable shortening, what you want to do is you want to grease your pan, which can be anything from a tart pan, a pie pan, any kind of small pan, or something that you can fit in the oven. And so we're going to take our pan, we're going to put some shortening in it, and then you want to grease the bottom of your pan so your biscuits no longer stick. And once that's ready, your pan's been prepared, and now it's time to start rolling out and start cutting out the biscuits. So all you have to do is just roll your dough out to about half an inch, a quarter of an inch thick. You don't want them necessarily too thick because remember, this doesn't have baking soda in it. They're not going to be the light and fluffy biscuits that you're used to today, but they're going to taste just as good, especially if you cook them over a fire. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take any kind of cookie cutter that you want to, typically something that's in a round shape. I like using the materials that we have available. So I like using a mason jar lid, and that gets you a nice medium-sized, large to large round size biscuit. But you can use any kind of cookie cutter you want at home. It can be any kind of shape, or you can just cut them into squares. But all you have to do is just take your cookie cutter and cut some dough, put it in your biscuit pan or your tart pan, and then they're ready to go into the oven. And so I've got 4 biscuits here that are about half an inch thick that are ready to go into our Dutch oven. So we're ready to start getting our biscuits and putting them into the oven. And so if you're doing this at home and you're using your conventional oven, at this point it's very easy. All you have to do is just stick it into your oven for about 10-15 minutes at about 350 degrees, and then they'll be ready to go once they start turning a little bit golden brown. But for our open hearth, it's a little bit more challenging because we are going to be using what is called a Dutch oven here, which is a historic version of an oven that would have been typically available during this time period in the 19th century. But we have to do a little bit of preparing. And so the fire that we've had going here in the open hearth has been going for about 3 hours at this point. And I know you can't feel it behind the camera, but the heat that is just radiating off of the stones from the coal is incredibly hot, and that's what we are going to use to create our oven temperatures. I'm going to take some of our coals that we have here, and you actually shovel them out here onto the stone. And that is why this is called an open hearth. So the way that our Dutch oven works is that you put coals on the bottom to help preheat the bottom of the oven. And then once it starts getting hot, then you can put your biscuits in. And so putting our biscuits into our Dutch oven, all you have to do is you just cover it. And then we're going to take our coals and put them here on top. And that heats both sides of the Dutch oven to really create that circular heat effect that we find in conventional ovens today. And so cooking over an open hearth takes a little bit longer than a conventional oven, and so our biscuits will be ready in about 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll check back in with you once they are ready to go. After about a half an hour and after a couple of rounds of making biscuits, you can see that we have pulled out a series of golden brown biscuits that are ready to eat. And so what you can do at home is you can put some butter on it, or you can put some raspberry jam on it, or some strawberry jam, any kind to give it a little bit more of a sweeter taste. and then you're all good to go and enjoy. We'd like to thank you so much for checking in with us and learning how to make beaten biscuits. If you have any questions about the recipe, or if you have a comment you want to make about the history of cooking, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, and we look forward to hosting more videos for you in the future.